Well, and particularly if you're like a subscribe and save, then you get dinged, and then you lose that retention. So I did want to follow up because Robert mentioned about the pricing, and I said, no, it slipped my mind what I was going to say. And of course it came back. In terms of pricing, and I've got, one client in mind where, again, they really got hit hard around May of last year, almost a year ago, with cost increases, and particularly those on wood products. And, they passed through, they didn't get greedy. They just passed it through the cost increase. And what we saw when, unfortunately it wasn't tested, but after the fact, we looked at it, and, they kind of did the same thing on two product lines. One product line, they're competitive on, they do a good business, but their market share is not dominant. Their share of shelf is not dominant. On the other product line, same thing. In both cases, they raised price roughly 10%. On the one where they weren't so dominant, that 10% price increase cost them 30% in unit volume because nobody else raised price. And in the other category, they are incredibly dominant. They dominate the share of space, share of self, paid and organic. They passed that price through. And yeah, they lost some unit volume, but they actually did more revenue because they were so dominant. So back, Robert, to your point, about price increases, it's taking that whole product portfolio strategy. Maybe your overall product portfolio, you're suffering from cost increases, but there's strategic ways, what we're saying with this one client is maybe we should actually have increased price 15% on one, the dominant, and not at all on the other. And that's, what I kind of lost track of that I wanted to say to your point about raising prices strategically. That can work.
And even on an item level basis, right? So, for example, the 1099 versus 10 or 999 example I gave earlier, that exceeded a price threshold. In another case, you might find that your price was $7.99, but the customer doesn't matter. They're not critical of the fact of paying $9.99 versus $7.99, or maybe a better example is $8.99 versus $9.99. It's not a big difference. The consumer's saying it's under $10 or it's between $5 and $10. They're not looking at it as critically, and you may have been giving up margin on that. So if you can increase areas of opportunity where either you're able to still stay under an important price threshold, or you're still able to be competitive in a marketplace because you've analyzed your competitors and you've identified, in this particular product, I'm up against these core competitors. I can boost price and still hold my ground. But in this other case, it's too competitive. There's not enough differentiation of my product. Price is too impactful. I've got to hold price if I want to stay the leader in that space. So do it at an item level basis. Don't do it across the board. Whenever we see a client that says, I took a 10% price increase or 15% price increase and just applied it across the board, it almost always leads to some sort of learning that leads to, we shouldn't have done it that way. We should have taken our time. We should have rolled this out more strategically. So when you work with us, we will put caution on that, and we'll guide you around the process of, what should we be looking at? What should we be considering? And do it in a thoughtful manner.
Yeah, I think you've got the topic lined up for a little later. I won't get too much into it, but we're working now with a vendor client that is really dealing with the same, cost of goods is going up. And unlike third-party sellers where, leaving out the issue if there's other sellers competing for the buy box, but assuming you're the brand and you're selling 3P and you've got the buy box, you can do what you want with your price, and it's easy to go up and down and measure things. It doesn't work that way with vendors. They don't dictate the price. And so, again, I'm not going to get into too much detail now because I think it's coming up, but we're going to
jump right into it, Paul.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So we're going into using a couple different third-party tools because we have no way to know what Amazon is going to accept. say, yeah, we understand why you're asking for a cost increase.
And now we're talking not retail prices, but cost increases,
wholesale.
but we know that the retail prices are a factor of that, right? So
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah, so we're using tools like Viral Launch that shows pricing trends and tools like Keepa. And we're looking at both bestsellers in the category and kind of the overall category and looking at pricing trends. And you know, the objective is that we will be able to guide the client and say, you know, yeah, we know you wanted to increase price here this much, and you know, another amount in another assortment. But if you look at this competitive analysis, again, you're swimming upstream. You're saying to Amazon, I need to increase my price. Well, they're not going to just eat it, you know, so they're going to either have to increase their price or you're going to lose the buy box or something. And now we're getting this competitive to help the client say, I probably have a better chance to increase my sell-in cost to Amazon because in general, the best sellers in the category, the prices are trending up versus in another assortment, they're flat or trending down. So just to make the point that whether it's 1P or 3P, the kind of competitive analysis has got to be factored in.
Another thing to point out when it comes to vendors is when you're trying to push through cost increases, Amazon's concerned about one thing primarily, and that's their net PPM. So they're looking at you holistically as your vendor, but they're also looking at it at an item level basis. And if their net PPM goal in your category is 50%, and you've got some items that are under 50%, you're probably getting crapped out on the really low ones. And but on the high margin items that are 65% margin, that's the opportunity to raise costs on those items where you might be able to get them to algorithmically justify that the cost increase is valid and that they will accept it. Push through as many of those as possible, and then work with the exceptions, the things that we need to kind of force our hand on getting these cost increases pushed through, and those often require involvement with the buyer or vendor manager, and they're going to need evidence, you know, documented on why. You're building up a case. They're going to need to understand what are you doing for channel control measures. Do you have a map price? Are you changing the list price? What are you doing so we can, you know, continue to sell your product at a price that's going to be profitable for us? So we'll guide you through all of those things if you're a vendor. We're doing it with a couple of vendors actually at the moment that are dealing with cost increases and how to push those through, and have been very successful at doing so. But again, it's not a 10% across the board. It usually will fail if you were to do that. So anyways, we'll end that there unless there's further things to add related to cost changes or anything we've talked about so far. Okay.